by Jung. The header is good, and it's the Thai defender Jung-Tae-wook, and eventually Korea have broken the deadlock.
You're listening to the K-League United podcast, proud partner of Football Nation Radio.
Hello, annyeonghaseyo. Welcome to the K-League United podcast. Matthew Binns here at the K-League United training ground as we continue our pre-season series with some new formations. I'll be playing somewhat of a Son Jun-ho role, shoring things up at the back and upsetting people on the internet when I win things, while joining me in this experimental midfield trifecta and providing the creativity, unpredictability and the whereabouts of the local pizza school, we have the Gimjae Gascoigne, Peter Hampshire.
Oh, I'll happily take that nickname, yeah. Gimjae Gascoigne.
Well, if only, I suppose in Gimjae, your level of footballing ability might rival that of Gascoigne.
Oh, I noticed the other week, we've got on the pitch, there's a big banner with the K7.
Oh, really?
Didn't have that last season, so maybe we'll be hosting some games this year.
Well, we'll be coming to the lower leagues actually later in this podcast, but we do have to mention the other person we have here making up our midfield and making his first start for the podcast. It's the second most popular icon out of Daegu after Rika the Hedgehog. It's our very own Jung Muyeol. Welcome to the podcast finally, Muyeol.
Hello, thank you for having me on the show.
Well, yeah, we finally managed to get the schedules to align and get you on your first pod proper. So how's life been treating you over in Durham?
Well, it's been pretty good, honest, because this is our third lockdown, and we entered the lockdown, get out of the lockdown, and then national tier system, blah blah blah. So much different changes in rule, but I've been just holding up pretty well.
Well, I'm glad to hear you're holding up all right over there. Yeah, it's a bit of a terrible time back in the UK at the moment, and well, we're wishing any UK listeners as well, and hope they're staying safe during these difficult times. But onto a slightly lighter note, and I mean, I don't wish to plug the Patreon so early to listeners, but those K2 tier subscribers can bear witness to what is an impressive mane of hair you've got coming in there, Muyeol.
Yes, I think this is the longest hair I ever have had in my life. And then just all the hair shops just shut down, so I can't even get a chance to.
You're not attempted cutting it yourself yet?
No, well, I tried actually, but at the moment, I don't see anybody else, so it's all right having this long hair.
Looks good, mate. Seriously.
Yeah. For listeners who may not be familiar with Muyeol, well, firstly, how dare you? But secondly, Muyeol is our Daegu FC correspondent at K-League United, and as well as quite often being the man we go to when we need to double check something. And I guess that's kind of what you're going to be doing today. You also do quite a bit of refereeing. Am I right in saying, Muyeol?
Yes, actually, you are right. I've been refereeing like for almost 6 years. So I started in Korea, and then I moved to the UK, and then I started doing again here. So it's kind of my hobby outside of my usual work, and then outside of my watching football activity. And here, yes, but at the moment, unfortunately, because of all the national lockdown, I don't have any games to referee these days. But I've been pretty much enjoying the life as the referee as well.
Yeah, the armchair referee that you've been at the moment.
Yes,
possibly enjoying some of the VAR calls in the recent K-League matches. I don't know whether we should delve back into them. I did hear that Ryan get quite heated last week on the podcast again over the VAR calls that he deems unforgivable, the ones that Paul deems unforgivable. Do you deem them unforgivable, Muyeol? Let's throw you a grenade nice and early.
I'm not going to say anything about that.
Okay, that's the safest option, I think. Okay, well, we are going to be hoping to utilize some of that refereeing knowledge in this episode as we look ahead at some of the new rules and regulations, exciting, that have been announced in this off-season. And we're going to take a look at how the ones that are coming in immediately, how they could affect the K-League in 2021. We're then going to have a quick check-in on the state of the military team and military exemption before moving on to what is being billed as the Battle of the KLU Pub Quiz Champions. Yes, that's right. You are listening to KLU Pub Quiz royalty with reigning champion Peter Hampshire and summer champion Jung. And they're going to be taking on each other in a end-of-episode quiz, so do stay tuned for that. So, gentlemen, are you ready?
I was just thinking about my upcoming humiliation in that quiz. I might have an emergency around an hour, around the hour point that I need to get off to.
Well, we're not going to try and make it to the hour mark, unless that's what you want, listener. There are some polls out on K-League United at the moment. Always plugging. This is But yeah, you can find all our latest engagement survey on K-League United to tell us what you like about everything we do. But I digress. We're going to get started, and we're going to start with some of these new rules. So a rundown of the new rules. The biggest one, and we are going to be getting into detail in this in a minute, it's that there are going to be 5 substitutes for this season, kind of to take, as we've seen in the Premier League and other leagues in Europe, it's kind of to take some of that stress off the tight fixture schedule, and also with the pandemic as it is and things. We'll delve into that slightly later. We're also going to be looking at the introduction of, an option for professional teams to make a professional B team and play in the lower divisions. So that'll be coming up later. We're going to be, we're not going to talk on it too much, but there is a reorganisation on loan limits this year, which see 5 in and 5 out domestically on loan. But that's only for players over under 22. If you're under 22, you can go wherever you like on loan, and new club rules will be fine. More interestingly, loan players can now play against parent clubs. So terrible news for John Buck, or would have been last season. There's also some roster limits, some win bonus limits, some percentage salary caps. These are all coming in stages in a couple of years' time, and so we're going to cover that probably also in a couple of years' time, because I think we've got a tight enough schedule as it is. But there is one more ruling that I missed out until Muyeol had pointed out to me before this podcast, and that is the Bosman ruling. It's in the K-League. Well, K-League doesn't really have it. K-League has an interesting system with free agency. So, Muyeol, would you like to explain what the current setup is, and how it may be changing in next year?
Yes. So at present, when the player signs contract with the club, they are usually given some kind of money as a deposit, so that they should fulfill their contract until the end of their contract. So once they finish their contract, then they becomes free agent. Usually that time is the end of the year. So even if they become FA, the free agent, so if they sign with another K-League club, only with the K-League club, then the club who's going to buy the player still have to pay some small amount of money to the previous club because of that deposit previously the player received from the club.
Yeah, so people who may have been wondering about the transfer of Stanislav Ilichenko to John Buck, he was up for free agency, but then John Buck did pay a certain amount for him, and this comes back to this rule. He was his contract was up, but he's moved to another K-League club, so John Buck had to negotiate with Pohang for some kind of settlement there. But from next year, players will be allowed to move freely towards the end of their contracts. And do you think that this could have an effect at all on how clubs might be looking to manage their players come the end of the season?
But I think, it is certainly happening a lot at the moment now, just because a lot of Daegu fans actually are worried about how Daegu managed to go through this season, because we saw a lot of not key players but just peripheral players leave the clubs, And then, so one of them is Kim Dae-won, and apparently he doesn't want to sign a new contract with Daegu, and he has only 1 year left. And then, so the outcome of from the club is sell him when he is still high at the market. So if there's no introduction of the Bosman rule next season, I think Daegu FC probably would have hold him until the end of season, because we still claim some small amount of money at the end of season.
Yeah, that is really interesting. It's going to change. It's going to change everything, and probably for the better, in my opinion. But Peter, where do you weigh in on this?
Yeah, there's so many players out of contract this winter. I've got my little booklet actually with all the players that went out of contract, and just at Gangwon they had about 15. So it shows you how these squads are put together sometimes. And it seems that this year there's been so many transfers between clubs and so many changes. I mean, there's only 12 teams in the league, and it seems every day there's a player going from club to club in K1.
Yeah, definitely. There's been a flurry of transfers, and maybe it's clubs now having to cash in because they know that they won't be able to cash in next season. I think that's a very good point. But that wasn't actually going to be the main rule we were going to lead with. But I think it was just worth touching on, given the amount of transfer activity we're seeing this window and what maybe adding to it. But the main one we are going to be looking at is the introduction of the 5 substitutes, because K-League, it got through COVID last season very well. There was only one confirmed case throughout both divisions over the course of the entire season, and they managed to play the entire course of the season using just 3 substitutes. But they have decided to change it to 5 substitutes this season. So, Muyeol, why is this being implemented now, and how is it going to work?
Well, actually, the league didn't specify why they introduced this rule for this season. But I think I can say at least 3 reasons behind those decisions. So first is the rule recommended by FIFA. So it's the football governing body, and there's no need to go against FIFA's decision. So that is the first reason. And then the second, I think this year the fixture is going to be much more congested than last year, because this season I think the league already says we are going to run down the 38 round as normal, and we have already a lot of the strains because of the COVID situation last year. So we've got the Summer Olympics and the international games as well, and the AFC Champions League as well. So this is kind of precautions for player safety and their welfare, as well as it's kind of as a mean to guarantee the certain level of play in the league wide. And the last but not the least is, I think, the recent good result from the Asian Games 2018 and the Under-20 World Cup. I think the good performances from those international competitions reinforced the importance of under-20 youth players in the league general. So I think having the 5 subs in the league enables probably young players to have more times in the League 1 and League 2.
Yeah, that's right. And regulars to the K-League, and obviously we're going to be listening to this podcast, so we'll already be familiar with the under-22 quota rule that is in force in squads in this league, where an under-22 player must start one in the starting 11 originally, so a team could make 3 substitutes, and it must have 1 on the bench, so they can have a maximum of 7 substitutes. Is this going to alter at all with this rule change?
Yes. So the number of the match day squad is same, so 18. So, but depending on the number of under-22 players in the match day squad, so the number of match day squad may be reduced to 16 if you don't have any under-22 players included. And also depending on the number of under-22 players on the bench, and the number of substitutions allowed will vary from maximum 5 to minimum 2 substitution only.
Okay, so well, that should mean then we'll get to see a lot more youth players this season. Peter, so 5 substitutes. We've seen it how it's been implemented in European leagues. How do you see this affecting the way that the game is played?
Yeah, I've seen it in the English Championship, which obviously I watch a lot, and the main change has been more youngsters involved. With the 5 substitutes, it gives chance. Especially in Korea with the under-22 rule, I think that'll just be implemented more. I mean, at Barnsley, for example, there's been so many youngsters, especially those teams that don't have the finance to compete. For example, Gwangju, you might see a lot more youngsters there as opposed to Jeonbuk, where they've got that strength in depth. I also think that it gives clubs the opportunity to bring on 3 subs at once to change a game. So if you're behind in a game, you can change things tactically more easily with 5 substitutes without worrying that you've used all your subs early in the game and there could be an injury and you're left with 10 men. So that's also how it's changed in Europe. I think we've seen managers taking bigger risks, putting on 3 players at once after 60 minutes and looking to change the game. And just watching Barnsley week in, week out, that has affected the games.
Yeah, and Barnsley seem to be doing all right from it, from what I've seen, and well, from what seems to drip feed into my Twitter feed timeline from yourself and the other Korean Reds.
Yeah.
Every morning,
for the 3 of us, just for the 3 of us, we do get in there, don't we?
Every morning, Scott Whitelock likes, Peter Hampshire likes, Incheon Luke likes. Yeah, says there's a for any Barnsley fans who are thinking of making the switch to Korea, there is a healthy Barnsley community growing.
We've actually got a program to help Barnsley fans settle into Korea. There's a specific program that you follow. Yeah, how to order Yorkshire tea, where's the local pork pies, things like that.
So, well, there you go. All Barnsley fans welcome. I'm not sure about anybody coming in from Sheffield, though. But Muyeol, do you have anything to add to, well, not just to the Barnsley discussion, but to how the game might change that Peter might not have already mentioned?
Well, I think, unlike the intent of the 5 substitutions rules introduced by the league, I think I believe still some teams will be pleased with the 3 subs because the 5 subs are only allowed when they use 2 under-22 players on the pitch. So I think, so I mean, if you start only 1 under-22 players, then you still have 3 subs allowed. So I think some teams still will be pleased with normal 3 subs in these conditions. So I'm a little bit of skeptical about this side of the rules because I don't think there's not much incentive for the teams to eagerly start under 22 players that long time.
Yeah, because is it right that if there's only 1 under 22 player in your starting 11, then to use all 5 subs, one of those 5 has to be under 22?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. So that's a lot for managers to think about when they're planning the substitutions in a game.
Yeah.
Well, it's a lot for me to think about when we're writing any match previews at this upcoming season. But okay. Well, cheers for explaining that. Well, let me ask you, which teams then do you think will benefit most? Let's say pick one each and why. So we'll start with you, Peter. Which team do you think is going to benefit most from this rule?
I think the obvious answer is Jeonbuk because of the strength in depth. But then you look at last season and perhaps they were missing under 22 players, included in that strength in depth. Other teams, Suwon showed in the Asian Champions League that they've got a squad capable with good youngsters. But it's hard to tell with these squads changing so much over the winter transfer window. It's hard to tell.
Muyeol, is there any teams that you think might stand to benefit this season?
Well, I think it's certainly Pohang because they are very well known for a hotbed of the youth product in general in the league, and they've got still Song Min-kyu and Lee Soo-bin also qualify for under 22 players, and those are two big names among the all under 22 players in the league wide. And the last season they actually filled like even more. So the minimum under 22 player were actually 2, but they filled more than 4 under 22 players on the pitch or on the bench. So I think this is definitely big chance for Pohang.
Yeah, that's actually a very good point. I actually had Pohang possibly suffering from this, but you make a very good point there. And similarly, I've said Ulsan, because Ulsan do have a lot of promising youth players. Now, I think Ulsan's biggest issue this season might be the bedding in of so many new names and the new manager. But in terms of this rule, I think Ulsan could really carve out an advantage here if they can play their cards right. But yeah, definitely the teams with more depth, especially in those lower those lower age brackets. So on the flip side of then, is there any teams you think could end up struggling? And I'll go the opposite way this time. Muyeol, is there any teams that you see might suffer from this?
Yes, for me is Suwon FC. This is not because they just promoted to K League 1, but they changed almost more than half of their squad, preparing for the coming back to the K League 1, and also they've got only one under 22 player who experienced professional football. I think this is quite clearly worrying for them.
Definitely, and Suwon, that's a very good point. Suwon FC had one of the lowest minutes for under 22 players last season in the K League 2, despite getting promotion. But yeah, so that's something they really haven't addressed as well. They've made a lot of transfer movements, but unless they've got some young kids in this, wonder kids behind the scenes that we haven't seen, that's a very good point you've made there, Muyeol. Peter, any teams you see struggling this season because of this rule?
Yeah, I went close to home, and I went with Gwangju. Not because they don't have any under 22 players, but I think there's only one that stands out, and that's Won Sang, who actually qualifies by a week to be an under 22 player this year. You have to be born after January the 1st, 99, and he was born on the 6th of January. So Kim Jung will be very happy with Won Sang's mother, I think, for hanging on those extra days. But yeah, Gwangju, obviously, it all depends on transfer outgoings and incomings over the next few weeks, but looking very light in terms of their squad this season.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I went for Pohang, but now Muyeol's actually convinced me otherwise, and it feels like a silly decision. I thought Pohang because the way their team has been torn apart, and they had quite a delicate balance last year. They had one real, core attacking 4, and with that torn apart, I just figure that their depth behind those, there isn't too many. But I mean, perhaps they haven't made all the moves yet that they're going to do in the window. And yeah, now I feel a bit silly having really considered their youth prospects. But anyway, it's going to be interesting to see how teams deal with it, and it's going to have to be something everybody's going to have to consider, commentators and writers and managers especially, on how this rule will be working. We're going to be going into another rule after the break, another one of these key rules, and so don't go anywhere.
FNR is a revolutionary football-dedicated digital platform, the first of its kind in Australia. It provides a 24/7 live online radio platform experience, podcast hub, and acts as a content provider for TV, radio, and digital. Having reached millions of listeners and football fans since launching, FNR is accessible worldwide via its website or app, providing a platform to discuss, debate, and celebrate the world game. We are your voice of football, FNR Football Nation Radio.
Welcome back to the K-League United podcast. I'm Matthew Binns, and I'm joined by Peter Hampshire.
Hello.
And Jung Muyeol.
Hello again.
Okay, and today we are going through some of the new rules in the K-League 1 for 2021, and also the K-League 2 as well. Let's not forget K-League 2. There is no party like a K-League 2 party, as Ryan and Paul will constantly go on about. But we know where the party's at, don't we, lads?
Yeah. All finished in the top 6 last year.
I know, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we're going to now. Before the break, we looked at the 5 substitute rule. Now we're going to be looking at the option for K-League clubs to pursue professional B teams. Before that, there's also some roster limits. Now, the roster limits, again, they're coming in a couple of years, but just to mention them a little bit, they are going to be capped up to recently. K-League clubs have been renowned for stockpiling players, especially some teams in the K-League too. I remember Daejeon having quite the squad list a couple of seasons back. But this is going to be reduced over time, but not straight away. Definitely not this year. With all the contracts that players are still on, and it's a bit contradictory to offer 5 substitutes and then cut down on the rosters. But it does kind of lead into getting players experience and stopping these players from being stockpiled. And so the K-League have said that clubs, they can opt to have their team in the reserve league, or they can create a B team that will play in the K4 league. So why are they doing this, Muyeol? I first ask you. Like, you've made the decision yourself. Why, Muyeol? Why? And is this a permanent change?
But I think, first of all, this news came after K-League signed the business agreement with La Liga. So I'm pretty sure they are just following the path the La Liga did and they are doing. And also, I think the K-League clubs, so as I said previously before, so the good performances in the Asian Games and on the 20 World Cups, I think they reinforced the importance of the youth player. So they just want to make a place for the younger players to develop rather than just buying players from just the school teams or other outside of K-League clubs' youth team.
Mm-hmm. And what are the benefits to such approach? I'm going to switch it to you, Peter, because you're more familiar with the. I'm trying to think of the name of the trophy without making it the old Johnston Paints trophy. I can't remember what it's currently branded as.
Trophy, yeah. I don't know what it is now. It's had about 8 names in the last 10 years. But
you don't know what it is now. As soon as Barnsley in the Championship, you've forgotten its name. You discard it. You won it a few years ago, didn't you?
Yeah.
But the reason why I bring that up, and it's not to disparage Barnsley in any sense of the matter. It's because Premier League teams play B-sides in this, not for the same reasons. Well, maybe slightly for some of the same reasons. But what is the benefit? What is the disadvantage? What are your feelings on the move?
In England, I'm ardently against it. I don't think it's fair for the Football League clubs to have to come up against Premier League academies. I don't think they feel like real games for the fans when you watch them. I think we actually played Manchester City under 21s in our cup run.
Great team.
But the benefits is real game experience where points are on the line for these youngsters who play in reserves leagues, because you hear from professionals all the time about reserve leagues. It just feels like you're playing against your mates when there's nothing on the line. It's not, and there's not many fans in the stands. It doesn't feel it's not that competitive edge that you get where there's a competition. And talking about this, it's not like it's a new issue. In La Liga, as Muyeol mentioned, they've had it for decades, the B teams. In fact, I was having a look earlier, and the Copa del Rey final in 1980 was between Real Madrid first team against Real Madrid B team. So I really hope we don't go that far in the K-League, because that would be an awful spectacle for a cup final. Other drawbacks, I wouldn't say it's financially beneficial when you've got, for example, Ulsan reserves playing against a K4 side. I can't imagine many people in Jinju or Paju wanting to go and watch a reserve team. And also, the reserve league has brought through some good names in the past few years. I was looking at some of the top assist makers: 2018 Songmin Kyu, 2011 Shin Jin-ho, 2006 Lee Kun-ho. So it's not like the reserve league hasn't been fruitful either.
They're all very good points. Muyeol, what is your personal take on this move?
I think this is certainly good for the lower league, like K4, because the K4 league is only 2 years old. They started last year officially. The K4 started like a couple of years ago, but within the football pyramid, they started officially launched last year with K3. So they need more attention to the league. So having the K-League clubs into the football pyramid in lower division, I think they certainly will draw more attention from the fans. And as Peter says, I think the youngsters have a more regular match experience against organized football competitions. Because I've been to a lot of reserve league games in Daegu while I was in Daegu. And even though it is organized football, it doesn't feel like proper football games. Just the other reserve players, they just come to the pitch and then leave the pitch. It's like almost as if it's almost like the just exercise or a friendly match. It's not the reserve league. The way the players accept. So I think this is certainly beneficial for the players. But outside drawbacks is obviously the financial situation for the clubs. Whether they can do in the short term, but whether they can do it in the long term is quite actually questionable.
I don't know how I feel about it, because I feel like obviously I wouldn't accept this back in England. I know my club, the as you call them, the Man City under-21s, they're actually referred to as the elite development squad. I'll have you know, Peter. But yeah, I'm not a fan of that. I wouldn't want B teams in England, for example. But I don't know. You can't always compare things to Europe. I know we kind of do things on this to kind of simplify thoughts and concepts, but in Korea, it's the K4 league isn't getting many fans anyway. There are some very dedicated fans in the K3, K4. Don't get me wrong, but I think having some of these teams play competitive football under the guise of a B team, it could work. I hope it's not a permanent decision. I hope it's only.
I think these teams in the K3 and K4, they need time to naturally grow. If it's only been a couple of seasons, that's not long to build those fan bases, and you don't want the top teams interfering.
That's a very good point. And you've also got teams that have been there for a while in the K3 anyway, mainly from the old K3 and also from the now defunct National League. They've already got these established fan bases, and while these B sides are going to be in K4, at some point they may cross paths down the line, and it just seems a bit of an odd one.
I've been on a lot of away trips with the Busan transport team. We've obviously been going for a long time. And it's a lot better going to Cheonan away than it is to Ulsan under-23s away. You can't take those days out away for the soju drinkers down in Busan.
No. Going to the Gwangju Auxiliary. Well, no, the Gwangju Auxiliary pitch is the new pitch, isn't it? It would the Gwangju team now play in the World Cup Stadium. This would be a complete role reversal. All right. Well, it's a rule that divides opinion, I would say. I think it's a good idea for this year, perhaps under COVID. But I agree. I like to see it in these teams who are already in the K3, K4, who have already put themselves forward. Some of these new clubs like Namdong, they're recently established for this new league, and now it's kind of taking the seriousness out of the league. It's what I would say. Like putting B teams in there, it kind of takes the credibility of that league away after clubs have set up there. But let us, if you're listening to this and you'd like to give us your opinion, well, please feel free to leave them in the comments. We'll get them into us at KLU United. We are going to have one more quick break, and then we are going to talk about military exemption in 2021. Don't go anywhere.
Fans, we want to hear from you. You're encouraged to email KLU at info@kleagueunited.com or tweet at KLeague United with any questions, comments or reactions. Or follow us on Facebook to ask directly during one of our live shows.
Welcome back to the K-League United podcast. I'm your stand-in host for today, Matthew Binns, and I'm joined by Jung-Muyeol.
Hello again.
And Peter Hampshire.
Hello, lads. Are you enjoying my Brighouse Town ladies attire tonight?
Oh, very nice.
Yeah, with the little PH on as well.
All right.
Duties. Yeah, a little treat for the Patreon members there.
all these reasons to subscribe to our K2 tier here. We've got fantastic hair from Muyeol and a deep cut football shirt from Peter Hampshire. But alas, we will be moving on to military exemption now. So, first of all, let's just say military exemption, nothing's changed in regards to the rule here. But there is a reason why we're going to be bringing up the rule today. But before we do, let's just have a quick review of it, just because some listeners have joined. We had a lot of listeners join last year because of the K-League, and some rules, they just need a little bit of a refresher sometimes. So I'm just going to explain it. In Korea, all able-bodied men aged between 18 and 28 are required to serve in the country's military for approximately 20 months. Would you say, Muyeol?
Well, yes, approximately 20 months, yes.
Yeah, depending on certain things.
What forms of military service you choose, yes.
Exactly. So when the time comes for professional footballers, they can apply to play for the league's military team, the now named Gimcheon Sangmu, provided that they have been playing at a K-League side for 6 months prior to their enrolment. Gimcheon Sangmu, formerly Sangju Sangmu, and now the third version of the military team, it should be said, they start life in a new location in 2021. That means that by the league's relocation rules, they have to start in the K-League 2, despite finishing 4th in the top tier last season. So, however, for players who don't wish to spend a season and a half in Gimcheon, and why wouldn't you? Gimcheon's lovely. There are many means to exemption, namely not many. There aren't many means to exemption, rather. They are namely in the form of a bronze, silver, or gold medal at the Olympics, or just a straight out gold at the Asian Games. So we're going to touch on the Olympics because it is an Olympic year. Sort of. It's a new Olympic year.
That's the question.
And that's what we'll be getting to, yeah. We're going to touch on it. But the reason why we are bringing it up is that there is actually one Korean international striker applying his trade at Troyes in France's second tier, Seok Hyun-jun, and he's been making the news in recent months for, to quote Yonhap News, draft dodging. So, Muyeol, the curious case of Seok Hyun-jun, what has gone on there?
This is very interesting news about like the public figures or the big athletics, because to be honest, this is not a common case to see those kind of people involved publicly. So according to the news, Seok Hyun-jun, so he earned the resident permit to Hungary while he was playing with Dresden FC in 2017, and so according to authorities in South Korea, he should have come to Korea by 2019 April, unless he has the official permissions from the government. So because he didn't come to Korea, nor he didn't say anything about his situation to the authority, he has been accused of avoiding military duties.
Which is certainly no laughing matter. Very serious accusation. I mean, what could this mean for his future? What do you see him? What is the speculation how he may try to get around this, or what can it mean for his future if the accusations are founded? And I mean, let's be honest, it looks like it from the outside looking in, unless there's something we don't know.
As far as I know, the prosecutions against him is suspended until he returns Korea. So he can stay abroad until his passport expire.
All right. Okay. So, yeah, I mean, obviously, to us, to Peter and I, it looks a very serious accusation. But for yourself, Muyeol, yeah, you have this military service enforced on all Korean men. What is your personal take on it? Are you,
Ooh, this,
or if you, sorry, we can always dodge it as well.
I think this is not a topic. This is, I think this incident beyond my personal judgment, because this is against the law. So I think this should be held within the law, because previously there was a similar case in Korea football. Some of you guys may have known, but the FC striker Park Ju-young, he went down the similar path actually ahead of 2012 London Olympics. But what all he did was actually wasn't against the law at all. He did all the things within the boundary of law. He just looked for a loophole in the law, and then he just exploited in a convenient way for him. But in Seok Hyun-jun's case, this is just purely against law.
Okay.
So I think, this is just beyond my judgment.
Well, we'll quickly move on before before we go too far with anything. And well, if you'd like to contribute to our lawyers' fees, you can do so on Patreon, but we'll get to that later. Moving swiftly on then from that at the moment. But if seriously though, the news on that, we do regular news roundups. Paul has been keeping on top of that as well, and it's going to be an interesting case to see how that develops. But yet there has also been another rumor in the news lately, and it was a rumor that was quickly quashed, it must be said, but it was about the Tokyo Olympics and whether or not they can go on this summer. Now, at the moment, it should be said that it's all steam ahead at the moment. They are going on the 2020 Tokyo Olympics in 2021, having been delayed by the pandemic. But it did bring up a very interesting hypothetical, because obviously, as we mentioned before, to get military exemption, Korean teams need a medal, bronze, silver, or gold. So, Peter, I'm going to ask you again a hypothetical. What if the Olympics are cancelled?
Yeah, I think it's more interested in Korea than it is in other countries, and for the Kim Ak-bum and the squad selectors, because that Olympic squad that he's got to choose is only 18 players. And if the Olympics is cancelled again, it pushes the age bracket up. I know that last year they said that they're keeping the same age limits as pretending it was happening in 2020. But would they do that one more time? And it also pushes it closer towards Paris 2024 Olympics. And for Korea, you've got two generations of players wanting to get that military exemption, and they're being squeezed together. And was only an 18-man squad. And looking at the squads that Kim Ak-bum selected last year, he had a 25-man squad for the November friendlies. He had another 27-man squad, and he's got to condense that. And it must be such a stressful position to be in, because you're kind of deciding on people's lives, aren't you, and their career paths by if Korea did get a medal at the Olympics.
Yeah, it could be a whole generation of players, like you said, and some of those players they've won the AFC Under-23 championship, but that is not it's not a prize that grants you military exemption. Muyeol, just again, it's all hypothetical. There's none of us are saying this is what's actually going to happen. But do you see that they could be granted exemption, or do you think it's just going to have to see if the Olympics go ahead?
No, I don't think the Olympic will go ahead, to be honest, realistically. And actually, it's all hypothetical, but I want to approach this matter from the perspective of the K-League clubs.
Okay.
So for the teams like Daegu or Ulsan.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, all the K-League clubs would be disappointed at the decisions of the Olympic if they didn't go ahead. But Ulsan or Daegu wouldn't be disappointed as like Pohang or other clubs, because we've got Jung Tae-wook and Jung Seung-won who has got who have got already military exemptions, but they are believed to join the Olympic teams for the competition. But the cancellation Olympic doesn't affect our players at all. So like for example, Oh Se-hoon, he's doing already his military service, and he is going to be finish his military service this summer. So actually, the cancellation Olympics doesn't that much for that players. While for Pohang or Gwangju, like the Sang, Song Min-gyu, they are looking forward to Olympics because of the military exemptions. Obviously, this is not a big part of the regions for Olympics, but it is still part of the regions why they want to be engaged with Olympics. So I think, yes, so the players and the clubs will find the cancellation of the Olympics very differently, I think.
Yeah, and well, the cancellation of the Olympics, it could certainly benefit some of this fixture congestion that's going to be coming up in the summer. But yeah, it's going to be another interesting one, another rule to keep your eyes out for in 2021. We are going to have one final break, and then after the break, it's going to be the battle of the K-League United Pub Quiz champions. So don't go anywhere.
O.G. Lewis is your neighborhood British bar and cafe located in the Old Giro district of Seoul. Decorated in old English antiques and furniture for a true homely feel, you can enjoy homemade scones, cakes and afternoon tea during the day, and traditional British favourites like beef stew, English ale, and a fine selection of wines at night. Available for private parties or simply an evening out, O.G. Lewis is sure to become your favourite neighbourhood pub. Be sure to mention K-League United at the bar during your visit and you'll get 10% off your bill.
Hello, welcome back to the K-League United podcast. I'm Matthew Binns and I'm joined by, well, from Gimjay, Peter Hampshire.
Hello, lads.
And all the way from Durham in the UK, it's Muyeol Jung.
Hello, gang.
I changed your name into the way you've typed it there, and I've introduced you to Jung Muyeol earlier. So we've got, you can pick and choose. So we've it's been a bit of a deep dive podcast, one for those who are interested in rules and regulations. And I thought, well, why not stop there? Let's go even more niche. And we're going to have a lineup quiz to test our two pub quiz champions. Now, Peter, he's the Gwangju columnist, as you may well know, for our website, and Muyeol is the Daegu columnist. Now, there was a memorable game between the pair last year. It finished Daegu 4, Gwangju 6. It's certainly one to look for if you're scrolling through K-League highlights. Now, those of you who've heard the lineup game, you'll know the rules, but just for the listeners who might not be familiar with it, there are 22 players on the pitch, obviously. The job of Peter and Muyeol is to go back and forth naming them. They can name players from either side. They're not just stuck to their own team. They have 2 lives. Now, just to make the game a little bit quicker, they will lose a life if they name a player that didn't play. But if they name a player that came on, they get to go again. Okay? So, we're going to start. Well, as Muyeol is making his starting debut, I'm going to let Muyeol take the first blow here. So, Muyeol, your player, please.
Felipe.
Oh, he's gone straight into the Gwangju. Felipe did play. Peter.
On Wonsang.
On Wonsang, he did start. Muyeol.
Yes, Sejinya.
Of course, Sejinya.
Sejinya, he did.
Your mic's gone off, Bins.
My mic went off, so remember to put this here. So
Yeah, you're back.
but my headphones have gone a bit off. Hang on. Wait a minute. Hang on, bear with me a second. Something's all gone a bit wrong here.
Yeah, your mic's on.
Yeah, well. Okay.
There we go.
We might,
Yeah,
right.
that's fine.
Okay. I've given Peter time to think there. Right. For the people watching on the podcast, it's given Peter time to find the to find the lineup on Soccerway. But Peter, okay, so Peter, your choice.
I'll go for Willian, Gwangju-Willian.
Oh yes.
He did. He started up front. Muyeol.
But obviously, I will go for our first goal scorer, Dejan Dynamich.
Oh, very good. Muyeol's naming the goal scorers now in order, Peter. So yeah, Dejan Damjanovic, he did start scoring after 2 minutes, actually.
Yes.
My turn. I'll go for Jung Sung-won.
Oh, Jung Sung-won, the internet heartthrob and Daegu's right winger. On the field, it should be said, not politically. Muyeol.
Yes, Edgar da Silva.
Edgar Silva.
Yes,
Did he start?
he did. He came on as substitute.
He came on as a... No, Muyeol loses a life.
He
Am I
did.
looking at... Did he?
Yes, he assisted the final.
Oh, he scored the third goal, yeah. Hang on. He scored the third. But he came on.
Yes, he came on. Yes.
Sorry, Peter. The money that you'd paid me there to help you win is not come through. Edgar came on, so you need to choose another one, Muyeol. So it can't be if you choose a player that's come on, you need to go again.
Oh, okay. Oh,
So it's only starting players.
Okay, I didn't know that.
That's okay.
Okay, Go Sung-yoon, the goalkeeper.
Oh, of course, yes. Go Sung-yeon, he did start in net. Peter.
I'll go for Im Min-hyuk.
Im Min-hyuk.
I know he played well, but did he come off the bench?
He did come off the bench. It's
okay.
like he's been watching this defeat on replays ever since, having flashbacks.
Yoram.
He was not in the team, and this is not me getting it wrong this time. He was not there. You lose a life.
Oh.
You lose a life, Peter. So, Muyeol, your turn.
Kim Sun-min.
Kim Sung-min. He did start, yes, in central midfield for Daegu. Peter?
Hong Jun-ho.
Hong Jun-ho, he started at centre-back for Gwangju. It's getting very tense now. We're running out of players. Who are you going to choose, Muyeol?
Giant defender, Jung Tae-wook.
Oh, the giant defender, Jung Tae-wook.
Yes.
How did you not get that one, Peter? It was in the intro.
I'm worried that Ashirmatov was also suspended, but I'm going to go Rustam Ashirmatov.
He started at centre-back and he scored.
Yes, he
He
scored.
scored the second goal for Gwangju.
Okay, I'm go for Kim Woo-seok.
He did. Kim Woo-seok did start in defence for Daegu. We could get the full 22 here if we're lucky.
Kim Chang-soo.
He did start at right back. Hit for Gwangju, should be said.
Well, our under 22 player, Jo Jin-woo.
He did, and he got booked as well.
Kim Dae-won.
Oh, he's dived into the Daegu side, and he is, he's come out with a result. Yes, Kim Dae-won did start.
Oh, okay.
This is a big rally. Diving into each other's teams here. This is great.
Yes, the Gwangju midfielder, Park Jung-soo.
He did. Park Jung-soo was in central midfield. What a striking blow that could be to Peter there.
There's two Gwangju keepers that he changed between all the time.
Yes.
I'm going to go for Yoon Pyong-guk.
He was in net. Jung Pyong-guk was in net. You've dodged a bullet there.
Okay, so we've got one more players in the midfield. Kim Sun-min, so it should be Nishi Tsubasa.
It was Nishi Tsubasa. Yeah, so there's the midfield completed for Daegu.
Yeah.
Peter, you haven't got many left.
Right. If your run was suspended or injured, then I'm going for he was replaced by Yo Bong-hoon.
He was. This is getting very tense. I actually can't remember which ones we haven't got. Usually somebody's out by now. Muyeol.
Okay, so Felipe. Yep. So maybe Do Hyun-suk.
He was. Do Hyun-suk was in the centre.
Yes.
There's one Daegu player left, I think, if I'm counting right. There's one. Yeah, I can see one Gwangju, one Daegu.
I'm going to go for Gwangju left back, the man with the thunder thighs. It's Eo Dum.
Was he injured?
Was he injured?
He was on the bench. He didn't come on. Peter, you're out. It was actually Lee Min-gi at left back. That was quite good. We got 20 of them, which I think anyway. I might have to do the math. If there's one missing, it might have been cut out in the edit. But no. So quick rundown of the team there. Just the starting 11s. For Daegu, it was Gu Sung-yeon, Kim Dong-jin, Kim Woo-sok, Jung Tae-uk, Jo Jin-woo, Kim Son-min, Nishi Damjanovic, Sasina, Kim Dae-won, Jong Sung-won. And in the Gwangju side, it was Yoon Pyong-guk, Kim Chang-soo, Ashmuratov, Lee Min-gi, Hong Jun-ho, Park Jung-soo, Young Bong-hun, Felipe Willian, Do Hyun-suk, and Won-sang. And that means that Muyeol is once again the reigning K-League United Pub Quiz champion. It should be said that Muyeol actually got the most questions right in our Christmas quiz as well, but he bet them all on the wrong team and lost most of them. But yeah, never bet against Barnsley is what we've learnt. But yes, speaking of Barnsley, Peter, would you like to tell our Barnsley listeners and other listeners?
Ooh, you might cut out again there. After you said Peter, it cut out.
Everybody watching this can see the difficulties we go through each week in podcasting. They're usually caused by me. All right, Peter. Once again, can you tell? I won't do once again because maybe the people who are listening to the podcast have had this cut out. So, I've forgotten what I said. This is what usually happens if you're watching this. Peter, could you? Yeah. I had a nice little outro and it's gone. It's gone. I've done it. It's gone.
That's it now.
Making up on the fly. This is. Ryan will be back next week, possibly. This is me. I'm losing my job here. This is me getting an Alan Partridge style breakdown on air. Anyway, if we're going out live as well, this would be great. Okay, and I'm just going to start from the pub quiz. So,
yeah,
and that makes Muyeol our reigning pub quiz champion of champions. And he also won the Christmas quiz in terms of questions, but he bet all the points away, betting on Barnsley actually. But speaking of Barnsley, Peter, for people who might be interested in joining one of our pub quizzes down the line, as well as looking at this video, for instance, and a number of other exclusives, what should they do?
Well, if you enjoy what we do here at K-League United, you can join our Patreon. There's exclusive editorial pieces each week. You've got places to find regular transfer rumour updates. Paul Neat has been very busy in the last couple of weeks with those. There's daily K-League briefings if you want your finger on the pulse in terms of Korean football. And recently that has included those new rules that we've discussed in this podcast. Coming up again this season, it's the return of Saturdays with things like fair play rules. I did a piece on Korea against Japan, best foreign strikers. We have our pub quizzes, which you can get involved in, and you can also watch the old ones, as Matthew just mentioned. And there's lots of new and fresh ideas coming for the 2021 season, full with player interviews and podcast extras, lots of video content. Tiers start as low as $1, and some more juicy stuff from $3 and $5 as well.
That's right, all at patreon.com/K-League United. But also you can get in touch with us at social media, all at K-League United. That includes Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. No TikTok yet. We haven't got Ryan to start the dances. But you can also listen to this podcast every Thursday live on Football Nation Radio. You can also subscribe to us via iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, TuneIn Radio, and more. And, well, if you leave a review, you can get entered in this month's K-League Kit Contest. I do believe this will probably be the final podcast where we'll be giving away the Suwon FC away shirt from a couple of years ago to celebrate Suwon's glorious return to the top flight. But that's it from myself, Muyeol, and Peter. Thanks so much for listening.
정조선 공용 폭격기 김신우